Hello and welcome to another episode of Stories of Facilitating Software Design and Architecture. Today we are joined by Michael Plöd and Beja Nickel. As I hopefully I got that right. And we're gonna hear a story from Michael. I'm hoping that he's gonna tell a brilliant story, and then we're gonna ask some questions and make some comments and see what happens. As usual, I'm joined by my co-conspirators Andrew Harmon and Kenny Bass Schreiger. Michael, the floor is all yours.
Yeah, thank you. I want to talk about a story that maybe quite a few folks encounter when they're working on legacy modernizations. I mean, it's a rare case that we work in our industry on the greenfield. Everyone who works in a larger organization deals with legacy systems that are 20 years old, 30 years old, where some old tech may be in place, but also maybe old processes. And I very often hear about from younger folks or from folks who come in externally, like from external consultants. And I'm an external consultant by myself, have been for most of my career. Oh, this legacy system sucks. This is so bad, and we need to get rid of this, and so on. And my story is a little bit about empathy in this case. And it was a couple of years ago when I was leading architect for a big legacy system modernization. And this was a very old system, quite a bit of a COBOL code base involved, mainframe systems, but also Java Swing user interfaces and a lot of that stuff, and a lot of that embedded in a very hierarchical organization, yeah, with a lot of command and control, a lot of micromanagement. They claimed to be agile because they used Scrum, but it wasn't like really agile in any way in that. But there was the decision to modernize this thing. And of course, all the fancy buzzwords were thrown around: microservices, cloud, agile, domain driven design, Angular, Spring Boot, whatever. Yeah, all the stuff. DevOps, of course, as well, and Kubernetes, of course. All the fancy stuff. What you usually hear when you do CDD, which I refer to as conference-driven development. And so it was hard to sort these things out and to really bring in some sense, a part of the modernization frenzy. But I realized there was one person who was resisting very, very heavily in that way. And part of the resistance I could understand, but there were other parts of the resistance where I really struggled to get a grip. Yeah, to really get into that. Why is this person acting like that? And especially in like higher management circles, when the management came together in Germany, it's called the Lenkungsausschuss. Steering committee is probably the best English term for that. There was sometimes vetoes about things where I was like, why? Why is this person acting like that? And there were quite a few voices that said, oh, someone from the upper management should get him in control and whatever. And I I reached a point where I was so fed up with that person that I was like, okay, I have nothing to lose. I went up to him and said, hey, can I have 30 minutes of your time? Why? What do you want? What do you want? And I was like sort of a target for him because I was driving part of that modernization. And I was like the marketing face also for the modernization, so to say. He was like, ah, what do you want? What do you want? Why should I spend time with you? Blah, 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 and all that stuff. And he agreed to have a meeting with me. And it was at the end of a business day, like 4 p.m., 5 p.m., something like that. And I was like, hey, I don't understand parts of your system. There is something that I don't see that you see, and I would like to understand that. Um, you have a history of over 30 years in that company. You know way more stuff than I do about this company, about this system, and so on. And I would like really to really understand where your resistance is coming from, because I want to avoid making any mistakes or not understanding a certain context. Yeah, not seeing a certain context. Yeah, maybe I'm blind because I'm an external consultant and I don't claim to know everything because I'm just an external consultant. He brushed me off. He was like, "Go away. What is this crap all about? Well, you want to throw everything under the bus and blah 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 and so on." And I was like very dissatisfied with that and left. And 2 weeks later, he came up to me. He said, "Hey, let's meet again." I was like, "Oh, interesting." And I came into his office and he said, "You need to thank my wife for this meeting." I was like, "Okay, I'm getting really curious now." He was like, "Yeah, when you came to me, I was really pissed. I was really angry. And I came home and took the anger to dinner. And my wife was like, "Why don't you tell him? What's this fuss all about? Tell him." And so he was like, "Yeah, okay, I'm going to tell you now very honestly, and this stays in this room. I am allowed to talk about this publicly, but in a very anonymous fashion. So I won't disclose the industry, the area, or wherever. I'm allowed to tell the story, but no further details." Yeah, so I'm not stabbing his back behind and right now. And he said, "Well, listen, I started at this company when I was 16 years old. I'm going to retire in 5 years. And I was what you young folks nowadays say the rockstar developer of the company. I created all of this. This is my baby. And now everyone is running around claiming that this system is a pile of crap and that it needs to go away. And I am struggling with that. Are you actually aware how much money this system earned the company?" And I was like, "Okay, thank you very much. Now we're talking. I understand your context. I understand why you think that way. And by the way, what I always say is to any external consultant or to any facilitator, when you deal with legacy, that system must have been very, very successful in the past. Otherwise, they couldn't pay your daily rates right now. And always treat legacy with respect and always assume that no one 20 years ago got up saying, 'Oh, let's build a really bad system.' No one ever did that. I'm very sure." And I was talking with this person and we talked a little bit about context. The context back in the day was what Gregor Hohpe very often says, economies of scale for systems. Yeah, so reusability, centralization, control. But the context has changed, and I'm also quoting Gregor, towards economies of speed. Yeah, and I said, "Well, you made a lot of really good decisions in the context that you were in, but the environment maybe changed." He was like, "I never looked at that from this perspective." And I said, "Okay, I'm not going to give you any advices right now. Let's leave this where it is. I'll think about it and I'll come back to you." A week later, I approached him and asked, "Hey, do you have more time? I have an idea." And I said, "Hey, actually, you have a really cool chance in your career at this moment. You can be, you are already the architect and the developer, the lead developer for the very first, very successful systems architecture and system for that company that earned them millions, if not billions. But you can now open the gate for a context switch of this system. Yeah, getting that system ready for a changing context that's happening now. And you can bring in all your knowledge about these things, about the company, about the system, to be the path maker for the second very successful architecture in there." And he was like, "Michael, I want to kick you out of the room right now because I hate your positive attitude all the time, but I'll let it sink in." And a few days later, I just received a mail, I'm in. And that opened many doors. And what I want to tell with this story is don't brush off resistance and always try to find out where this stems from. Yeah, I would say 98% of the people don't work on ill intents or bad intents. They don't have bad intentions, but they have a certain perspective. And when you facilitate things, when you don't try, and I think that's a key differentiator between architecture as a hierarchical position of power, where you say, hey, I'm the big boss architect now, and you do it my way, and shut up, and the discussion is over, versus facilitating architecture. I think what is very important when you are a facilitator and when you want to facilitate architecture, especially also when you want to facilitate architectural change, you need to have empathy. You need to try to understand these dimensions. You need to understand where resistance from certain players and key players, stakeholders, comes from, and then you can actively work with that. I think that can open many doors. And this question, hey, why are you like that? Opened quite a few doors. Hey, could have also gone terribly wrong. Yeah, that they kicked me out and so on. But sometimes you have to take a risk, and that's risk taking. Yeah, these things can go wrong, but there is no guarantee for that. And also, part of that empathy is try to understand the context. And no one got up and said, let's build a horrible system where they will hate us 20 years later. No one ever did that. No one probably thought about that system existing 20 years later when they designed it. So that would be my
Yeah.
story that I want to tell.
Thanks. So you the at the end especially I'm very curious because at the end you say I take a lot of risk, and I think a lot of people, myself as well in the past, taking that does a lot to a person. When he kicked you out, sort of like kicked you out or say it's nonsense, right? There was 2 weeks in between. How did you feel in those 2 weeks? Did you ever meet him then, and how did you cope with that? I'm very curious because many people probably find it hard to do this because they feel very uncomfortable getting into that situation. At least I am still to this day feel very uncomfortable with that. Were you?
Mm, I think I have quite a bit of a resilience with these things. So um, I don't know why. I can't tell you. I didn't train that or whatever. I can live very well with people not liking me. Yeah, so that gives me that doesn't mean that I don't care at all. Yeah, but I can draw very good boundaries for myself. I don't know why, how that came to place. I never explored that. I'm not a psychology person or anything like that, but it is like that. Of course, I encountered him in meeting and I just ignored the situation. I just dealt with it like this never happened. I remained professional. I didn't take it any personal thing. I always say you can toss a lot to my head in a business context, and I can still go out to a bar with you. Yeah. So that doesn't mean that I appreciate any toxic behavior or there are certain boundaries to that. Yeah. Um, but for myself, I can draw very good boundaries, I think, so that it doesn't bother me too much. But I thought about that, taking that risk very, very explicitly. So I was prepared for various situations how that could go along. Yeah. So when I do that stuff, I just don't do that intentionally. Oh, let's go in there and whatever. So I weigh in the pros and cons, and I already have a plan how I deal with that if things like that happen.
But I think what you just said, the splitting of the person and the conflict or the topic,
Yeah.
something that I feel like makes it very essential to feel respected, even though you might disagree on something. And that already helps people to actually digest what you just said. And about this, what you said, Kenny, like what helped me in this is to accept that some people need time. And especially when it's about switching perspective and being like saying, okay, I was wrong, or this takes a lot of time to jump over your own like shadow to be like, okay, shit, maybe I need to switch. And this takes time, and being patient, and to learn to be patient and to tell yourself once again, be like, hey,
Yeah.
give the people time. You won't get anywhere if you stress them. Let them come back to you instead of forcing it too much. That helps me in such
Yeah.
situations, at
And I
least.
think you said something very interesting. So I do, so everyone's different, right? So I do have a personal problem with people not liking me. But what you said was very interesting. I think we should take the same approach, which I always try to ask to people as well. And I think that's a learning point is before you go into that discussion or that conversation, try to already imagine, and it's a Stoic thing actually. Found out later on, Stoics do it a lot. The Stoics are not emotionless. They already went through the emotion before it happened, so that in the moment they are more grounded. So I think that's an interesting thing that I do as well. Like I imagine what will happen during that and I weigh the pros and cons, and then I already went through what was going on. Not always, right? Yeah.
I find that really I find that really interesting that you're able to set really good boundaries while at the same time you're able to be highly empathetic. I think that is a very, very hard skill because I find, for example, I can have high empathy, but if it's someone that is attacking me personally, I find that very hard to like. It's something that cost me emotionally. It's emotional work I have to do. Do you find that you have to do work, or is it you're doing the boundary stuff and it doesn't require any emotional work for you?
I don't take these offenses personally, to be honest, because I think you can, for instance, exchange me for Andrew, for you, Andrea, for Kenny, and the result would be the same. I don't think that I personally get attacked. I think the position that I am in is the one that is being charged. I don't think that this person thinks I, Michael, am a full blown idiot. I think this person has a problem with the task that I have, with the position that I'm in. And I think that is the first boundary that I draw.
Yeah, I wanted to. So I think there's one thing you said, Michael, I thought was super interesting because people talk about like certain types of people take risks, and they always mean like intellectual risks or like financial risks or some other kind of risk. But you took like an emotional risk with yourself, just to like I would be like Andrea. I get very physical reactions to these things, and whether I can like think about, intellectually, I could be like they're talking like everything you said. I'll still feel it really physically, physically in meetings, which is not fun. Um, but then the person as well, then you gave them space and they took an emotional risk. And I think that, especially in software where we get super emotionally involved in what we build and the results of those things, which is exactly what you described, right? I think that kind of risk is a really big key part of this, and it's less talked about. I think people are like, oh yeah, we ran fast and broke things, and you didn't. You like went slow and like listened to people, and that had the biggest impact, right? The more you push this person, it probably would have got worse, worse, and worse, right? Then his wife would have been, yeah,
Absolutely.
you're right. This Michael guy's a complete jerk. You should really make his life
Yeah.
hell. But
Yeah,
instead, it was different. So
yeah, I completely agree, Andrew. It's a construct because we do get emotional, because angriness is also an emotion that people don't construct as an emotion, but there's always underneath that. So I think that's something we should talk about more often.
Yeah, and I mean, something that also I tell my teams that I work with when we have discussions, that it's not about my idea or your idea, but it's about ideas that one person brought up or another person brought up. But if you get too attached to the idea or to your idea, or for example, in Michael's story, to your change, if Michael would have said, hey, I want to drive this change because this is my initiative, then you get emotionally attached, and then it's harder to detach this from you as a person. And that also helps a lot. I mean, sometimes it's hard. It's easier to say and to consult other people to make, hey, don't take it as your decision or your idea. Still, it helps to repeat it for other people, but also for yourself.
I have a question, and this is a very practical consulting question that I think most of us will be able to relate to, which is sometimes I see the same thing that you see, right? And the thing of this person, why are they acting like this? I do believe people are self-consistent. My question is, how do you manage to carve out time? Because even this half an hour investment and this other hour investment, like as consultants, we tend to need to have to explain all of our time. And sometimes I can't invest in all the whys I want to answer. Um, and this is a hard problem for the consultants and also for the companies. So I think both are disserviced by our lack of discretion on the usage or time. Sometimes I just do it anyway because I think it's a risk to the project, like a high risk. But it also means that we're losing on some good key learnings. I wonder how you manage that, or if you kind of built in some discretionary use of
Mhm.
meetings or whatever.
Um, I must say that I've rarely been in an environment where I had to justify 30 minutes of my time on a timesheet. Maybe I was just lucky, but that 30 minutes or something, or scheduling a meeting with some key stakeholder, has never been seen as something that I have to justify. And if someone would have come to me and asked, hey, why did you, what were these 30 minutes on your timesheet for, or this 1 hour on your timesheet for? I would say, hey, listen, I'm one of the driving architects for this change. And I think stakeholder management and dealing with stakeholders and talking to stakeholders is one of my key tasks of an architect. Yeah, I would say it's not my task to let's say, set up some really low level details in the Kubernetes installation. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think it's my task to align the perspectives of various stakeholders together. Yeah, to create a shared understanding about this modernization. And this is one of the key stakeholders. So I think it's an integral part of my job to talk to this person. And if you have a different perspective on the work of an architect, yeah, we have to talk about my role in general. So that would be the thing that I would say if someone would have challenged that.
It's great to hear. It's great to hear
Yeah, I
that
would.
because it's like sometimes I hear discussions about, oh, architects shouldn't really need to talk to stakeholders in a one-to-one level. I find that mind blowing, but it's good to see that I'm not alone.
What I always say, I sometimes teach software architecture foundation courses for the ISAQP. And what I say in these trainings to aspiring young architects is that stakeholder communication in a way that is suitable for certain stakeholder groups is one of the most important key skills for any architects in my eyes. Yeah, so I think if you would ask me what is the key skill of a really good architect, I love quoting Gregor Hohpe. It's riding Gregor's elevator. Yeah, being able to talk to stakeholders on various levels with various perspectives in a way that they understand you. Yeah, don't bring out a live coding session to the C level. Yeah, and don't bring McKinsey styled slide decks to the engineering team. Yeah, to say it in a very blunt fashion. And I think that's one of the most important skills as an
And,
architect
and I want to add to
for
that,
me.
not to an architect, to architecture. If you look at domain-driven
Yes,
design, the most important aspect of domain-driven design is understand the problem. Who knows the problem? Stakeholders.
absolutely.
If you don't have the people on board, you cannot drive any change because the change is in the people and not in the system in the end.
This
Yeah.
is this is. It's been wonderful to have you in this episode. I love the topics that we touched on. Thank you so much for joining us, Michael and Beja, and we'll see you again in the next episode. Goodbye.